My beloved child, tonight the future seems to be answering a question you never knew was being discussed behind your back. Not with anger. Not with rejection. But with a conversation that quietly changed its direction. Archangel Michael brings your attention to something unusual. The person you love has been carrying your name into places where you were not physically present. And recently, inside their family circle, your name surfaced again. Only this time, nobody changed the subject. They listened. One person asked a question that made the entire conversation slow down. What is it about them that you cannot simply forget? Your person could have given an easy answer. They could have smiled, avoided the subject, or pretended their feelings were temporary. Instead, they became unexpectedly serious. They spoke about the way you affected their thinking. The way certain memories of you still return during ordinary moments. The strange sense that their future feels different whenever they imagine you completely gone from it. And that was when the family began seeing something they had not fully understood before. This was never just fascination. There was depth here. There was history. There was an emotional connection your person had tried to explain logically but never could. Now hear this carefully, because the surprising decision did not arrive immediately. At first, different opinions filled the room. Someone was cautious. Someone wondered whether too much time had passed. Another person quietly questioned whether both of you were ready for what reconnecting might actually mean. Yet one voice shifted everything. A family member who had previously remained neutral finally said something no one expected. Maybe we should stop deciding the ending for them. And suddenly, the atmosphere changed. Imagine that. The conversation you might have assumed was about keeping distance began transforming into a conversation about allowing truth to reveal itself. Archangel Michael's message is not asking you to chase anyone. It is asking you to recognize the difference between forcing a door and discovering that a door has quietly stopped being locked. Because their family finally began discussing something larger than the past. They discussed your person's happiness. Their future. The kind of relationship that would actually bring peace instead of appearances. And when they compared those questions with what your person had been saying about you, an uncomfortable realization surfaced. You had been judged through fragments. Through timing. Through incomplete stories. Perhaps even through assumptions that were never properly examined. But your person was giving them another picture now. A fuller one. And there is one detail you need to hear. When someone asked your person what they would choose if nobody else's opinion mattered, there was almost no hesitation. Your name came into the answer. Not dramatically. Not loudly. But naturally enough that everyone noticed. That small moment became the turning point. Because families often understand feelings differently when they stop hearing theories and finally witness certainty. And what happened next may surprise you even more. Instead of telling your person what to do, they reached a decision among themselves. They would no longer stand in the way of an honest conversation between you. But that was only the first part of their decision. There was another condition discussed afterward, one connected directly to you, your future, and what they now believe your person must do differently if they truly want you in their life. And when you hear what that condition was, you may finally understand why this private family conversation happened now, and not months ago. Something shifted after that room became quiet, my beloved child, and the next words were not about whether your person cared for you. They were about whether they were finally ready to prove it. Because the family had reached a conclusion. If your person truly wanted another chance to move toward you, they could not return carrying the same confusion, the same hesitation, or the same unfinished patterns from before. One family member said it gently. If this person matters that much to you, then do not approach them halfway. That sentence landed differently. Your person did not argue. They did not defend the past. For a moment, they simply looked down, as though they were seeing certain choices from an entirely new distance. And Archangel Michael draws your attention to that moment because something important happened internally. Your person began understanding that love is not only what someone feels when they are alone. Love becomes meaningful through clarity, through consistency, through the courage to communicate without making another person guess where they stand. Stay close to this part. Because the family's surprising decision was not merely to accept you. It went deeper. They decided that if your person came toward you again, they should come with intention. No mixed signals. No promises made only in emotional moments. No expecting you to repair what you did not break. They wanted your person to be able to look you in the eyes and explain what had changed. And then came the question that nobody expected. A relative asked. If they opened the door tomorrow, what would you actually say? Your person went silent. Not because they had nothing to say. Because suddenly, everything they had been rehearsing privately felt real. They imagined you standing there. Not as a memory. Not as a possibility somewhere in the distance. But as a real human being who deserved a real answer. And their response surprised the family. They said they would begin with an apology not for loving you, but for allowing uncertainty to speak louder than what they actually felt. Then they said something even more revealing. They wanted you to know that while others had opinions about the connection, nobody else had lived inside it. Nobody else understood the small conversations. The strange timing. The moments when both of you seemed to understand something without saying it aloud. That changed the room again. The family was no longer discussing you like an outsider. They were beginning to see you as someone whose side of the story mattered too. If this message is resonating with you, you can share it with someone who needs encouragement, leave a comment about what clarity means to you, and subscribe if you want to continue these quiet journeys together. Now listen carefully. Because after all of this, one person in the family made a suggestion your person was not expecting. They said, "Then stop talking about what you might do. Decide what you are actually going to do." And for the first time that evening, your person smiled. Not nervously. Not uncertainly. It was the expression of someone who had just been challenged to become more honest with themselves. They made a decision. A specific one. Something involving communication, timing, and a truth they had kept hidden even from their own family. But before they revealed what they planned to do, one final question was asked. A question about you. And your person's answer changed the family's understanding of your connection more than everything that had been said before it. Then came the question nobody in that room had prepared for, my beloved child, and strangely, it was the simplest question of the entire evening. Do you believe this person still matters to your future? The room became still. Your person did not rush to answer. And that silence was not uncertainty. It was the kind of silence that appears when someone realizes they are about to say something they can no longer take back. They looked toward the person who had asked. Then they said something that changed the entire meaning of the conversation. Yes. But I think I finally understand that wanting someone in my future is different from becoming the person who can build that future with them. That answer surprised everyone. Because until that moment, much of the family discussion had been focused on circumstances. Timing. Distance. Past misunderstandings. Things that happened. Things that were never said. Things other people believed. But suddenly, your person was no longer blaming circumstances. They were looking at themselves. And Archangel Michael draws your attention here because this is where the story moves beyond romance. This is about maturity. Awareness. The moment someone stops asking, "Why did everything become complicated?" and finally asks, "What do I need to change so I do not repeat the same pattern?" That question can alter an entire path. Your person admitted that there were moments when they expected you to understand things they never clearly explained. Times when they hoped you would somehow sense what they were feeling without them having the courage to put those feelings into words. They admitted something else too. There had been moments when other people's opinions became louder than their own inner knowing. And the family listened differently now. Because some of those opinions had come from them. One relative lowered their voice and said, "Maybe we thought we were protecting you when we were actually making you doubt yourself." Your person looked up. No accusation. No resentment. Just recognition. That is important. Because this private family conversation was not turning into a battle over who had been right or wrong. It was becoming something far more powerful. A correction. A clearing. A moment where everybody could finally see the situation without needing to defend the past. And then something happened that your person had never expected. The family member who had once been the most cautious about you asked, "What did this person actually bring into your life?" Your person smiled faintly. And the answer did not come as a grand declaration. It came through details. They spoke about how knowing you made them question parts of themselves they had ignored. How certain conversations stayed in their mind long after they ended. How your presence made them think more seriously about what kind of life they wanted to build. How you somehow made ordinary moments feel connected to something larger. And then they said, "They made me realize I was living according to what was expected of me, not always according to what felt true." The room went quiet again. Because now the family understood something they had missed. Your connection had not simply created emotion. It had created change. And change can make people uncomfortable before they understand it. Sometimes a powerful connection does not enter someone's life only to make them feel loved. Sometimes it arrives like a mirror. It reveals the places where they have been settling. The places where they have been afraid. The places where they have been choosing familiarity instead of truth. That was what your person was finally describing. And perhaps, my beloved child, that is why the family had misunderstood the connection before. They were looking at the disruption. They were not yet seeing the transformation beneath it. But now they were. One relative finally said, "I think we were judging the effect without understanding the reason." That sentence opened something. The conversation became calmer, more thoughtful. And then the family began asking questions about you that they had never asked before. Not questions about your background. Not questions about appearances. Not questions designed to evaluate you. They wanted to know how you treated your person when nobody else was watching. Did you encourage them? Did you listen? Did you challenge them honestly? Did you make them feel more like themselves? Your person's answers surprised them. Because again and again, the details pointed toward the same truth. You had not been trying to control their direction. You had been encouraging them to recognize their own. And that realization changed everything. The family began understanding why your absence had not simply erased the connection. Why time had not reduced you to someone from the past. Why your person still compared future possibilities with the way they once felt around you. But there was another revelation waiting. And this one was more personal. Your person admitted that they had been thinking about reaching out to you for longer than anyone knew. Not impulsively. Not because they were lonely. They had stopped themselves several times because they did not want to come back into your life without knowing what they could genuinely offer. That admission shocked the family. Someone asked, "How long have you been thinking about it?" Your person paused. Then answered, "Long enough to know it isn't a passing feeling." That changed the energy instantly. Because suddenly this was not an emotional decision made after one difficult evening. It had been growing quietly. Privately. Perhaps for weeks. Perhaps longer. Your person had been looking at their future and repeatedly finding your memory standing somewhere inside it. Not demanding attention. Simply remaining. And there is a difference between remembering someone and continuously discovering that they still matter. The family finally recognized that difference. Then came the part Archangel Michael wants you to hear with complete clarity. A family member leaned forward and said, "If you do contact them, you must be prepared for the possibility that they have changed too." Your person's expression softened. "I hope they have." That answer surprised everyone again. Because they were not hoping to recover an old version of you. They were not asking life to rewind. They understood that whatever might happen between you would have to belong to the future, not become a copy of the past. That matters more than you may realize. Because real reconciliation, real understanding, real renewal, whatever form it takes, cannot survive when two people are trying to return to who they used to be. It needs two people willing to meet again as who they have become. And your person seemed to understand this now. They said, "If we ever speak again, I don't want to ask them to go backward. I want to know who they are now." Something about those words touched the room. Even the family member who had been hardest to convince stopped questioning whether your person should communicate with you. Instead, they asked, "What would you want them to know first?" This time, your person did not hesitate. That I never wanted them to believe they were easy to replace. There it was. The sentence beneath all the other sentences. The truth hidden underneath months of uncertainty. Your person had begun realizing that silence can create stories in another person's mind that were never intended. Distance can look like indifference. Confusion can look like rejection. Fear can look like absence of love. And when someone waits too long to explain themselves, the other person often has no choice but to interpret what they can see. Your person finally understood that. But do not miss what happened next. The family did something none of them expected when the conversation began. They stopped giving advice. Instead, they asked your person to make one promise. Not to them. To themselves. If you approach this person again, be honest enough to accept whatever truth comes back. Your person nodded. That was the real condition. Not that you must respond in a certain way. Not that everything must immediately become perfect. Not that the story must follow somebody else's preferred ending. The family had decided that if your person wanted to move toward you, they should do it with honesty and give you the same freedom to be honest in return. That may sound simple. But it represented a huge change. Because now nobody was trying to control the outcome. They were finally respecting the connection enough to let truth decide what happens next. And in that moment, something shifted inside your person. They no longer looked like someone asking permission. They looked like someone accepting responsibility. There is a profound difference. Permission says, "Tell me what I should do." Responsibility says, "I know what matters to me, and I will handle it with care." Archangel Michael's message carries that distinction toward you now. You do not need to chase the unfolding. You do not need to prove your value. You do not need to compete with anybody's opinion. What is meant to become clear will require clarity from both sides. And perhaps that is exactly why this family conversation happened. Not to choose your future for you, but to remove one layer of interference so that two people can finally see their own truth more clearly. Yet the evening still was not over. Because just when everyone thought the decision had been made, your person revealed one more thing. Something they had not planned to tell their family. They reached for their phone. One relative noticed and asked, "What are you doing?" Your person stared at the screen for several seconds. Then said, "I already wrote something to them." Nobody spoke. There was a message. Already written. Not sent. Your person had apparently created it earlier, returned to it more than once, changed certain words, removed others, and kept it waiting. The family asked what it said. Your person refused to read the entire message aloud. They said some words belonged only between you and them. But they shared the opening line. And when the family heard it, the atmosphere changed one final time. The message did not begin with a dramatic confession. It began with accountability. "I don't know what you believe about my silence, but I think you deserve to know what it actually meant." Stay with that line. Because it reveals everything. Your person was no longer trying to impress you. They were trying to explain themselves. And sometimes the most important conversation does not begin with, "I miss you." Sometimes it begins with, "You deserve the truth." The family looked at each other. Then the same relative who had once questioned your connection said quietly, "Maybe you should finish that message." Your person answered, I already did. A pause. Then why haven't you sent it? Your person looked back at the screen. And their answer became the final surprise of the night. Because there is one thing I still need to do before I contact them. That one thing was not about another person. It was not another family conversation. It was not about waiting for a perfect sign. It was something your person believed they owed you before stepping back into your world. Something connected to a promise they once made, a mistake they now understand, and a future decision they are finally ready to make. And once the family heard what it was, they stopped being surprised that your person still loved you. They became surprised by how seriously your person was preparing to show it. The room had already accepted one truth, my beloved child, but what your person revealed next made everyone realize this was no longer just a conversation about feelings. It was about action. Your person placed the phone down. They looked around the room and said something nobody expected. I don't want to contact them until I can offer something different from what I offered before. A family member immediately asked, "What does that mean?" Your person took a slow breath. Then came the confession. They had realized that the biggest thing standing between you was never necessarily another person, another opinion, or even the distance between you. It was inconsistency. There had been moments when their heart moved toward you while their actions moved in another direction. Moments when they felt something deeply but became hesitant when it was time to speak. Moments when they wanted closeness, then became overwhelmed by what that closeness might require from them. And now they understood something they had avoided for far too long. You cannot ask someone to trust your feelings while giving them reasons to question your actions. That realization changed your person. Not overnight. Not through one dramatic moment. But slowly. Quietly. Through reflection. Through uncomfortable honesty. Through the realization that if they ever entered your life again, they did not want to become another unanswered question. They wanted to become an answer. Stay with that. Because this is where the family's final decision became even more surprising. One relative said, "Then don't contact them because you miss them. Contact them when you're prepared to be clear." Your person nodded. And the family agreed. No one wanted your person to rush. No one wanted another emotional conversation that would disappear the moment life became complicated. What they wanted was simple. If your person returned to you, they should return knowing why. Knowing what they wanted. Knowing what they were prepared to build. That was the standard. And surprisingly, your person welcomed it. They did not complain that the family was making things difficult. They said, "That is exactly what I want too. Do you see how different this is?" Earlier, your person might have interpreted accountability as pressure. Now they were beginning to see it as preparation. Because the future they imagined with you could not be built from the same habits that created confusion in the past. Something new required something new from them. And Archangel Michael draws your attention to this because sometimes the greatest change is invisible before it becomes visible. You may not witness someone reconsidering their choices. You may not hear the conversations where your name is spoken. You may not see the moment they finally understand what they lost, what they learned, or what they want to protect differently next time. But invisible change often arrives before visible movement. The family had now noticed that change. And one by one, their opinions softened. Not because your person convinced them with perfect words. Because they could see that your person was no longer speaking from impulse. There was calmness now. A kind of certainty. One older family member finally asked, "What happens if they don't respond the way you're hoping?" That question mattered. Your person looked at the phone again. And their answer showed just how much they had changed. Then I respect it. No argument. No frustration. No attempt to control what you might choose. They continued. If I care about them, then their peace has to matter too. That sentence stopped the conversation. Because there it was. The evidence the family had been looking for. Your person was not talking about possession. They were talking about respect. Not about winning. About honesty. Not about pulling you backward. About creating the possibility of meeting you somewhere new. And for the first time that evening, the family member who had once been most skeptical smiled. You're finally talking differently. Your person smiled back. I think I'm finally seeing differently. That distinction mattered. Words can change temporarily. Perspective changes everything that follows. And perhaps, my beloved child, this is why you were never supposed to force this chapter. Some realizations cannot be handed to another person. They must arrive from within. Someone has to recognize their own patterns. Their own fear. Their own hesitation. Their own responsibility. Only then can the next conversation mean something different. A few minutes later, the family began talking about what could happen if you and your person eventually spoke. But notice what changed. Nobody was planning the outcome anymore. Nobody was deciding whether you belonged together. They had finally understood that decision was not theirs. Instead, they discussed how your person could approach you respectfully. Someone suggested a simple message. Someone else suggested giving you time. Another said your person should avoid trying to explain everything at once. And then came an unexpected suggestion. Don't tell them what you think they want to hear. Your person looked across the room. What should I tell them? The truth. Even the parts that make you look imperfect. That advice stayed with them. Because perhaps one reason certain conversations failed before was the desire to appear stronger than they actually felt. Your person may have hidden uncertainty. Hidden vulnerability. Hidden how much your absence affected them. Hidden how often they reconsidered decisions after making them. This time, the family was encouraging them not to hide. And that is extraordinary when you understand where this conversation began. Your name had entered the room as a sensitive subject. Now the family was helping your person prepare to speak honestly with you. That was the decision. Not simply, we approve. Something deeper. We will stop influencing this from the outside. If this connection deserves an answer, the two people inside it should be allowed to discover that answer honestly. Think about that for a moment. What if the greatest surprise was not that someone's opinion changed? What if it was that the entire environment around your person was changing? The pressure was becoming lighter. The interference was becoming quieter. The questions were becoming more mature. And your person was being asked to listen to their own truth instead of constantly measuring it against everyone else's expectations. That creates space. And sometimes, space is exactly what destiny needs. If these words have brought you a moment of clarity, you can share this message with someone who may need that same calm encouragement. Leave a comment with the word clarity if that is what you are choosing for your next chapter, and subscribe if you want to continue walking through these unfolding messages together. Now something unusual happened near the end of the conversation. The family began preparing to leave the room. The subject seemed finished. But your person remained seated. Phone still beside them. Message still waiting. One family member stopped near the doorway. They looked back. You're still thinking about sending it, aren't you? Your person laughed softly. I'm thinking about whether I'm finally ready to mean every word in it. The relative stepped back into the room. And what they said next became perhaps the most important advice of the entire night. Then don't send it tonight. Your person looked surprised. Everyone had just spent all this time encouraging honesty. Why wait? The relative explained. Wake up tomorrow. Read it again when the emotion of this conversation has settled. If those words still feel true when everything is quiet, then you'll know you're not acting because of tonight. You're acting because you've genuinely decided. Your person understood immediately. This was not another delay. It was a test of certainty. Would the truth remain after the emotion faded? Would the decision still feel right under the ordinary light of another day? That is a powerful question. Because genuine intention survives quiet moments. It does not need dramatic energy to keep existing. Your person agreed. They would wait. They would read the message again. And if it still carried the same truth, they would make their next decision with a clear mind. But there was another detail. Before leaving, that family member turned and said, "And if you speak to them, don't begin by asking whether they still love you." Your person frowned. Why? Because first, they deserve to know what has changed in you. Those words went straight through them. Your person realized that perhaps their first responsibility was not to ask what you could give them. It was to show what they were now prepared to give you. Clarity. Respect. Patience. Consistency. Honesty. And the freedom for you to decide what those things mean for your own future. The room emptied. Your person remained alone. The phone screen illuminated their face. They opened the message again. Read the first line. Then the second. Then slowly reached the final paragraph. And this is where the story takes another turn. Because there was one sentence at the end they had never shown their family. One sentence they had written days earlier and almost deleted more than once. It was not a promise that everything would magically become perfect. It was not an attempt to persuade you. It was something much more vulnerable. A truth about why they had remained silent for so long. Your person stared at that sentence. Then whispered. This is the part they need to know. And somewhere in that quiet moment, the family conversation had completed its purpose. It had not decided your relationship. It had changed the person who might soon be ready to speak to you. But that hidden final sentence. and what your person intends to do after you hear it may be the part that changes the entire meaning of everything that happened between you.